When Rex Ryan mocked Shedeur Sanders on national television, most expected a heated response. Instead, Shedeur flipped the script. He didn't speak. He didn't argue. He simply stood there, unbothered, collected, and in full control. His silent protest spread faster than Ryan's words ever could, dominating social media and transforming him from a rookie quarterback into a symbol of composure. It wasn't just a reaction, it was a statement. Behind the scenes, the fallout was immediate. ESPN scrambled to issue a suspension. Pilar Sanders fired back online, and Deion Sanders, the man who built a career on charisma, stayed silent. That silence carried more power than any post-game rant. In a single moment, the Sanders family showed what it looks like to win without saying a word. It was a word that turned the sports world upside down. Embarrassment. That's what Rex Ryan called Shedeur Sanders on live television in front of millions. No build-up, no explanation. Just one blunt insult that instantly lit a match under one of the most respected families in football. And in less than 24 hours, everything changed. The backlash was fast and loud. Fans weren't debating Rex's analysis. They were furious. Players, coaches, and viewers didn't just push back. They condemned it. The line between critique and disrespect had been crossed, and ESPN had no choice but to step in. A 1-week suspension was handed down. An on-air apology was required. It wasn't just about one comment anymore. It was about ESPN acknowledging that this was a step too far. Because there's a difference between talking about performance and tearing down someone's character. And Rex Ryan, he made it personal. He didn't dissect a game or question a play. He targeted a rookie quarterback, one who's already carrying the weight of his father's legacy, with a word designed to humiliate. But it didn't go the way he expected. Shedeur Sanders didn't respond with anger. He didn't call Rex out. He didn't defend himself with a mic in hand. Instead, he did something nobody saw coming. He shut his mouth and let the silence speak. At his next press conference, Shedeur answered every question by mouthing his responses. No voice, no sound, just calm, deliberate silence. And the internet stopped. The clip went viral. Everyone was watching the same thing and coming to the same conclusion.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
This wasn't avoidance. This wasn't passive aggression. This was power. Shedeur took the one thing Rex tried to use against him, his public image, and turned it into a statement of strength. Because silence is hard, especially when the pressure is high and everyone's waiting for you to slip. But Shedeur didn't flinch. He didn't give in. He refused to feed the narrative. And in doing so, completely flipped the script. That press conference became the moment. And just like that, the conversation shifted. This wasn't about whether Rex Ryan had a point. It wasn't about stats or tape. It became about the way athletes, especially young, high-profile black athletes, are treated in the media. The way their mistakes are magnified, their character picked apart, and their reputations dragged when they don't conform to an outdated mold. And in the middle of it all, Shedeur stood firm. But he wasn't alone. Shortly after his silent protest, his mother, Pilar Sanders, took to Instagram and let it fly. Her post was emotional, direct, and unapologetic. She didn't sugarcoat her thoughts. She called Rex Ryan out for what he said. She called out the negativity, the envy, the energy that made a grown man go on national television and call her son an embarrassment. She defended Shedeur not just as a mother, but as someone who's watched this dynamic play out before. The dismissiveness, the double standards, the public critique that crosses a line and targets identity more than performance. Her post struck a chord because it said what so many people already felt. That disrespect like this can't be allowed to pass without consequence. That athletes aren't just bodies on the field. They're people with families who feel every word. Pilar didn't speak in PR language. She wasn't trying to win the media war. She just wanted her son to be treated like a human being. And then there was Deion Sanders. Everyone waited to see how Coach Prime would respond. Known for his charisma, his fire, his presence, it wouldn't have been surprising if he'd gone on a media tour or sat down for a tell-all interview. But that's not what he did. Deion posted one emoji. Just one. No caption. No explanation. Nothing else. And it said more than any statement ever could. It was simple, but it was heavy. It said, I see what's happening. I stand with my son. And I don't need to scream for you to hear me. Because Deion knows the game. He's been the headline. He's been the villain, the hero, and everything in between. He didn't need to snap on camera to prove a point. His restraint was a point. He let Shedeur lead. He let Pilar speak. And then he made it clear, we got this covered. That's legacy. And the power of that family dynamic. The silent strength, the fiery defense, the strategic support. It reshaped the whole narrative. Suddenly, it wasn't about what Rex Ryan said. It was about how outdated that kind of commentary has become. The kind that hides behind blunt honesty, but ends up doing more damage than good. The kind that dehumanizes athletes for the sake of entertainment. This was about more than a suspension. It was about the growing demand for accountability in sports media. Because fans are no longer just sitting back and accepting whatever's thrown at them. They're asking questions. They're drawing lines. They're holding people responsible for what they say and how they say it. And ESPN, whether they wanted to or not, had to acknowledge that. By suspending Rex and forcing an on-air apology, they admitted, at least in part, that what happened wasn't okay. But for many, that wasn't enough. The apology felt flat, forced, mechanical, because at the end of the day, Rex didn't say something controversial. He said something cruel. And no apology can take away the fact that he used his platform to publicly belittle a rookie who did nothing to deserve it. Meanwhile, Shedeur's silence kept resonating. It wasn't just a trend. It became a blueprint. A new way to respond when someone tries to drag you. A way that doesn't compromise dignity. A way that doesn't let someone else control your story. That's what this moment taught people. That there's power in not reacting. That sometimes the smartest move is to not play the game. And that's why it stuck. Because this wasn't just about Shedeur Sanders. It was about how athletes navigate a media environment that still rewards provocation over professionalism. It was about the shift that's happening, one where respect, composure, and emotional intelligence are starting to matter more than volume. And Shedeur, without even speaking, set that tone. He took a moment designed to humiliate him and turned it into a conversation about how athletes should be treated, how families show up, and how silence can become the loudest response of all. This wasn't just about football. It was about legacy, integrity, and the evolving standards of what we expect from the people who get to talk about others for a living. Rex Ryan said one word, and the Sanders family responded with silence, strength, and unity. And in doing so, they won the moment and possibly changed the playbook. So what now? Will this moment really shift the way sports commentary is done? Will analysts think twice before crossing that line again? Will networks start prioritizing respect over ratings? Time will tell. But one thing is clear. The next generation of athletes is watching, and they're learning. Not just how to perform, but how to respond, how to protect their image, how to defend their character, and how to stay calm in the storm. And if Shedeur Sanders taught anything through this, it's that you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight to win. Sometimes silence does all the work for you. Now, let's hear what you think. Did ESPN go far enough with Rex Ryan's suspension? Was Shedeur's silent protest the most powerful response he could have given? What does this moment say about the future of sports media? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're into breakdowns like this, where sports, culture, and drama collide, make sure to subscribe. Because the games might end on the field, but the real stories, they're just getting started. This wasn't just a media incident. It was a cultural checkpoint. One of those moments where the world collectively realizes this isn't how we do things anymore. The reaction to Rex Ryan's words didn't split the audience. It didn't turn into a tired debate between old school toughness and new school sensitivity. No, this was different. The consensus was almost immediate. He went too far. That matters. Because for years, there's been a built-in tolerance for analysts crossing the line, for turning critique into personal insult, for letting their authenticity become a shield for being careless, disrespectful, and in this case, flat-out mean. But when Rex called Shedeur Sanders an embarrassment, it wasn't just over the top, It was unjustified. This is a rookie quarterback who's still learning, still growing, still proving himself in one of the most high-pressure positions in all of sports. And he's doing it with a microscope on him. Simply because of his last name, you can talk about performance. You can talk about decision-making. You can even talk about what he needs to improve. But calling a young man an embarrassment? That's not commentary. That's character assassination. And it hit differently because Shedeur has never asked for special treatment. He's never blamed others. He's not the loudest guy in the room. In fact, if anything, he's been under more pressure than most rookies, expected to live up to a Hall of Fame last name while carving his own path in the league. So when Rex, a veteran voice in the industry, took that shot on national television, he wasn't just being blunt. He was being reckless. And the world called it out. What made it worse was the imbalance. One man sitting in a studio with decades of NFL credibility behind him, using his platform to take a cheap swing at a 21-year-old trying to find his footing. There's no integrity in that. There's no accountability, which is why the silence that followed was so powerful. Shedeur didn't explain himself. He didn't fire back. He didn't beg for public sympathy. He just stopped speaking, showed up to his press conference, mouthed his answers, and let the cameras record it all. And that silence, it became a rallying cry. People weren't talking about Rex's insult anymore. They were talking about how Shedeur handled it. They were talking about how strong you have to be to say nothing when the world is begging you to respond. How rare it is to see a young athlete reject the impulse to defend himself, and instead, let the public come to its own conclusion. And let's be honest, that was the moment Shedeur stopped being just Deion Sanders' son. He became his own symbol of grace, of maturity, of knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. And that's what turned this from a controversy into a cultural shift. Because athletes have tried to control the narrative before, but usually through tweets, rants, podcasts. Shedeur did it by doing less, by refusing to play the game. And that refusal became more powerful than any soundbite could ever be. But the strength of that moment wasn't just about Shedeur. It was about the foundation around him. Pilar Sanders made sure this wouldn't fade quietly. Her Instagram post was direct, heartfelt, and necessary. She didn't just speak for her son. She spoke for every parent who's watched their child be unfairly criticized. She tapped into something raw. The frustration of seeing someone take advantage of a microphone to tear another person down. Not because of merit, but because they could. And when she called out the envy, the negativity, the energy behind Rex's words, you could feel that she'd been holding it in, because this isn't new. It's just finally being talked about. Pilar didn't play politics. She didn't clean up her message for optics. She said what she meant, and people listened. Because there's something powerful about a mother defending her child, not as a celebrity, not as a sports figure, but as her son. And that's what makes the Sanders family different. They don't need to coordinate their message. They don't need to strategize behind closed doors. They just show up. And whether it's Shedeur's calm, Pilar's fire, or Deion's calculated silence, it always lands. Deion's emoji post was one of the most talked about responses in the entire saga. Not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. No paragraph, no monologue, no press tour, just one emoji. And in that moment, he said everything. He said, I believe in my son. He said, we're not rattled. He said, you can't shake what we've built. That's the thing about legacy. It doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it just exists. And Deion knew the moment didn't belong to him. It belonged to Shedeur. And rather than steal it, he supported it. Quietly. Powerfully. That's why the Sanders family has become more than just sports royalty. They've become a blueprint for how to lead with dignity, for how to protect your family, for how to respond without reacting. And while ESPN tried to patch things up with suspension and a camera-ready apology, the real damage was already done. Not just to Rex Ryan's image, but to the system that allowed someone like him to feel that comfortable saying what he said. Because let's not pretend this was a slip. He meant it. And that's the problem. The suspension wasn't just about Rex. It was about ESPN acknowledging that the public is no longer interested in the old model. The audience is evolving. They want accountability. They want analysis that isn't rooted in personal attacks. They want respect because the athletes have earned it. And if the networks don't adapt, they're going to get left behind. This moment, this one word that set everything off, wasn't just about Shedeur Sanders. It was about every athlete who's been torn down for entertainment. Every player who's been labeled without cause. Every young person who's had to prove themselves twice as hard just to be treated like they belong. And Shedeur, without raising his voice, made sure none of that was ignored. So as this story settles into history, don't forget what it revealed. It showed that silence can be a protest, that families matter, that character counts, and that the future of sports isn't just being built on the field. It's being shaped in moments like this. The moment Rex Ryan used the word embarrassment on live ESPN airwaves, he stopped being an analyst and started being a cautionary tale. 1 minute, he was delivering what he probably thought was another hard-hitting take, and the next, he was the face of a very public reckoning about respect in sports commentary. The thing is, Rex wasn't speaking from nowhere. He was speaking from a long line of old-school pundits who built careers on tough love and brutal honesty, the kind that sometimes crosses into territory it was never meant to enter. In decades past, that kind of commentary might have gone unchecked. It might have even been celebrated as refreshing. But that time is over. The sports world isn't the same. The audience isn't the same. And athletes, they're definitely not the same. Athletes today don't just compete. They brand, they speak, they advocate, and they respond. And when someone tries to publicly tear them down, they don't always fight fire with fire. Sometimes, like Shedeur Sanders did, they say nothing. And that silence, it's smarter, stronger, and more devastating than any comeback could ever be. Let's go back to that press conference for a moment. The one that turned Shedeur's quiet resistance into a viral masterclass in self-control. The cameras were rolling. Reporters were lined up. Everyone wanted a quote, a reaction, a soundbite. They didn't get one. Instead, they got stillness. Shedeur sat there, answered questions with his lips only, never letting a single word escape. No anger, no sarcasm, no bitterness. And yet, he said everything. That moment wasn't just powerful because it would have denied the media. It was powerful because it forced everyone to sit with the discomfort of what had been said about him. It made people reflect, really reflect, on how athletes are treated, on how easy it's become to tear someone down without ever considering the consequences. And Shedeur wasn't playing the victim. He was asserting control. He was saying, you don't get to decide how I respond. He was saying, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it to you. He was saying, my silence is more valuable than your noise. And let's not forget, the world was watching. It wasn't just sports fans or Brown supporters tuning in. It was analysts, athletes, parents, and young kids who were just starting to dream about their own futures in sports. They saw a 21-year-old who didn't cave under pressure, who didn't lash out, who didn't give his critics anything to twist. They saw grace. And that grace wasn't isolated. It came from somewhere. It came from family. When Pilar Sanders took to Instagram to defend her son, it wasn't just a moment of maternal instinct. It was a reminder that these athletes have people, real people, mothers, fathers, siblings, mentors, who see every headline, read every comment, and feel every slight. Her post wasn't polished. It wasn't crafted for maximum virality. It was raw, unfiltered, and entirely necessary. She called Rex Ryan out, not just for his comment, but for what it represented. A culture that still finds it acceptable to degrade young black athletes under guise of honesty. She spoke as a mother, yes, but also as a witness. Someone who's seen this pattern before, who knows exactly how damaging that kind of rhetoric can be. And that emotion, that righteous fire, it gave people permission to be angry. It gave people a voice when they didn't quite know how to explain why Rex's words hit so hard. Pilar made it plain. Then came Deion. And let's be honest, everyone was waiting. This is Coach Prime we're talking about. One of the most outspoken, high-energy personalities in all of sports. A man who always has something to say. And yet, when the spotlight swung his way, what did he do? He posted an emoji. One. Just one. And somehow, that minimalism hit harder than any paragraph ever could, because Deion didn't need to remind the world of his status. He didn't need to defend his son's character. He didn't need to validate anything. His emoji said it all. We're good over here. That post? That one post? It shut down everything. It told the media, you can keep talking. We're focused. It told Rex Ryan, we don't need your approval. And it told Shedeur, you don't have to carry this alone. That's what a united family looks like. The beauty of the Sanders family's response was how different each person's role was. Shedeur's silence, Pilar's fire, Deion's stillness, and yet how perfectly they fit together. It was effortless. No strategy meetings. No overcorrection. Just three people reacting the way that felt most natural to them. And the public saw that. They felt that. It's why the backlash against Rex Ryan didn't just come from one group. It came from all sides. Fans, fellow commentators, retired players, people who'd seen this pattern before and were finally ready to call it out. And credit where it's due, ESPN actually acted. The suspension, while brief, was more than symbolic. It was ESPN telling its audience, we heard you. It was them acknowledging that media personalities don't get to hide behind their track record anymore. If you cross the line, there will be consequences. Was the apology enough? No, not really. Rex's on-air statement was awkward, mechanical, and, if we're being honest, probably more about keeping his job than owning his mistake. But still, the larger takeaway wasn't the words he said on that apology mic. It was the fact that he had to say them at all. That in itself is change. And let's talk about that change for a second. Because what this whole situation revealed is that the culture of sports commentary is shifting. The bar is higher now. Fans want analysis, not humiliation. They want accountability, not theatrics. And more than anything, they want respect for the players who put their bodies and reputations on the line every week. Shedeur Sanders didn't ask to be the face of that shift, but he handled it with a kind of maturity that can't be taught. He showed that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest, that sometimes silence says everything, that dignity, when backed by support and self-awareness, is impossible to tear down. And in doing so, he didn't just defend himself, he elevated the conversation. So, where do we go from here? The media will move on, as it always does. Rex Ryan will probably find another topic to rant about. ESPN will return to business, as usual. But this moment will linger. It'll get referenced. It'll be brought up the next time a young player gets unfairly targeted. It'll live as a blueprint for how to handle a situation that could have easily spiraled into chaos. And Shedeur, he'll keep playing. He'll keep showing up. And whether he speaks or not, people will keep listening. Because now they know what kind of man he is when the pressure's on. So here's your turn. Did ESPN go far enough with Rex Ryan's suspension? Should analysts like him be held to a higher standard? And what do you think was more powerful? Pilar's fiery defense, or Shedeur's unshakable silence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation that's not going away anytime soon. And if you're here for the real moments, the ones that expose the cracks, shift the culture, and rewrite the rules, go ahead and subscribe. Because sports may be what brings us together, but these moments, these are what keep us talking.